After a successful exit, how do you define success for the CEO?
That is a very personal question. And what we would say is before you sell, that's why we have exercises that we give our clients of what do they want to do next. Truly think about this. If you think you're going to just turn off the energy, turn off the volume per se, and sit on the rocking chair sipping lemonade the rest of your life and relax, you are sorely wrong. As an entrepreneur, you are wired a certain way and you can't just turn it off. So you need to take some time, relax, take some time. We always say take a year, go work your bucket list, go travel, go do all the things you've always wanted to do. But then after a year, really think about what brings you value. Is it starting another company for yourself with your kids? Is it mentoring? Is it coaching? Is it tutoring? Can be anything. The thing is you just have to have a thing. What's that one thing that gets you out of bed in the morning? And if you don't, that's where people get really sick, they get depressed and bad things happen.
Hoy tenemos un tema que es el sueño dorado de muchos empresarios y muchas veces la pesadilla de estos fundadores. Y vamos a hablar de cómo vender tu empresa y tener una salida exitosa. Para hablar de esto, me acompaña un experto con un historial impresionante. Él es Scott Bushkie, socio, director y fundador de Cornerstone Business Services. Scott no solo lleva más de 27 años en el mundo de la banca de inversión, sino que ha participado en la venta exitosa de más de 400 empresas. En la charla de hoy vamos a desmitificar el proceso de la salida. Scott nos va a revelar por qué mueren las ventas en las negociaciones de ella. No llega ni al proceso de la cierre, se cae por una mala negociación. Y vamos a hablar cómo la falta de realismo en el valor y la excesiva dependencia del dueño o dueña operando la empresa puede arruinar esta venta en el último minuto. Vamos a hablar también del factor tiempo. ¿Por qué deberías de empezar a preparar la venta de tu empresa idealmente 3 a 5 años antes de que realmente la quieras vender? Vamos a hablar de las tendencias en América, el continente americano, y por qué el 2026 y hacia adelante se perfila como un año histórico para las adquisiciones de Estados Unidos y Latinoamérica. Vamos a hablar también cuál es la diferencia entre una venta financiera y una venta estratégica. Vamos a descubrir el famoso término el Rembrandt en el ático y cómo encontrar a este comprador dispuesto a pagar una prima significativa por tu empresa para que tengas una gran salida. Entonces, si eres un CEO que se siente agotado o simplemente quiere construir una empresa para luego venderlo y de una forma muy grande, este episodio es para ti. Scott nos dirá la verdad sin filtros y lo va a escuchar directamente de alguien que ha vendido más de 400 empresas en el mundo. Escucha, escala tu empresa y obviamente ten una salida exitosa. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good night, depending on what part of the world you're visiting us. My name is Daniel Marcos, host of the podcast Scaling the CEO. And today I'm here interviewing Scott Bushkie. He's the managing partner and founder of Cornerstone Business Services. How are you, Scott?
Doing great. How are you today, Daniel?
I'm doing awesome. Hey, looking forward to really learn from you. As you know, I've been helping a lot of my clients be able to sell their business. Today, we're getting a realignment of the U.S. with America. We're saying Trump trying to clean out Venezuela and all this geopolitical mess that we have in Latin America, precisely because the U.S. wants to align. And we're getting a lot of offers, a lot of companies in the U.S. looking for acquisitions in Latin America. So I would love to be able to talk a little bit about that. But hey, in your experience, you've helped a lot of companies sell. Just do you have a number of how many companies have you helped successfully sell?
Last time we looked at it, it was over 400.
Or 400 companies.
Yeah.
So how long have you been an investment banker helping companies scale?
Been doing it over 27 years and about 70,000 hours spent in this space alone.
Very cool. All right. So in your experience, what is the thing that usually kills a deal? That it's everything goes well and then something happens that just kills the deal.
Yeah, it's typically the seller, not being realistic either on value or on deal terms. The two biggest deals drive when the buyer gets into diligence, the two biggest things that they look at are how much is the owner of the business? Is this truly yes, it's making money. Yes, it's profitable. But is it transferable to a new buyer? Because if the owner is the whole business, then either the owner has to stick around for 3 to 5 years, and they usually don't want to do that unless they're rolling equity. Or the second item is that they find out that their number one customer is a significant portion of the business. So it could be, we usually see things after 20, if your top customer is 20 or 25% or less, you're okay. But we've seen customers at 50, 70, 80%. Like, yeah, Daniel's been a client of mine for 30 years and he knows me well. He's been here forever and great guy and pays, on time. It's like, yeah, but that's with you, Scott. What about if I buy it? I don't know Daniel. Is Daniel your best friend's cousin from school or, whatever else it might be, or it might be a time where that transition, just there's a lot of risk there. So you look at what are those single points of failure within your company. And if you think you're going to hide anything in diligence, think again, because everything is much time and money is spent at due diligence these days. The buyer or someone on their team is going to find whatever skeleton is in the closet, and that's when the deals blow up.
Okay, so when a business owner is thinking about selling their company, what part of the process they usually overestimate, and what part of the process they usually underestimate?
They usually overestimate the value of their company. In many cases, they think it's worth more than what it really is because we just had a study done in America, and the study showed that less than 40% have had any kind of what we call an RMA, or real market analysis, that we do at Cornerstone, kind of a professional opinion of value by an investment bank, or any kind of certified valuation. That's ever within their company, let alone in the last year or two. So they have no idea what their company's worth or what market is, because so many things that they don't control can change the value, good or bad. And what do they underestimate? They underestimate the time they need to prepare and how long it takes to sell the company, transition out, everything else. A lot of them think it's going to be an event like selling your car, or like selling your home or something like that. And it's just, the preparation piece usually is what they underestimate. And they wake up one day and it's not fun anymore. They're burnt out. They're tired. They're sick. And they want to, even though it's all successful, but they want to get out of something. They're running away from something that they don't want to do anymore, versus preparing, taking the time to really get the company ready over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And now they've got this initiative that they're just executing on. And that's really when they get that top value and maximize the price and structure.
So how often or how long before a sale should a CEO start thinking and preparing the company before selling?
Yeah, in an ideal world, probably 5 years. But most people call us and they're ready to go tomorrow. So I would say, at least like if they had you as a coach for Daniel, or someone like on scaling up for a year, would be much better than 0. But I would say the 2 to 3 years. If you had 2 to 3 years to really proactively have a coach alongside you, because what we've seen is with a coach, it just gets done better, it gets done faster, and everything else. Because we've seen companies where we'll do a valuation for the company and then we'll update it at no cost for 3 and with scaling up 5 years. And they'll come back and they'll say, yeah, we could get a coach, but because we'll highlight the top 2 to 3 things that they could do to enhance the value the most, the biggest levers to pull. And they go, no, now I know I can do it. I can do it. And we always are like, well, Daniel, if you were going to do it, you would have done it before. And you're like, well, no, I'll do it now. And they'll usually do it for about a month, maybe 2 months. And then they go back into the same old way of doing things for 10, 20, 30 years. And they'll come back and get an updated RMA a year later to find out that they haven't moved the value at all, or it might have even gone back a little bit. And like, they're so frustrated, like, man, I just wasted a year of my life, and I could have got out last year for the same value. Why am I doing this? So I would say, 2 to 3 years, at least 1, probably don't need more than 5. The more the better, but 2 to 3 years with a coach, I think, is really the optimal time frame where you can really put the gas pedal down and, like we like to say, finish strong, and really see those trends going up and everything else. So that's where the buyers get excited, when you really got those positive trends in your within your business.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about Latin America. Just talk about trends, Latin America, and trends about selling companies. What are the trends that you're seeing today?
Yeah, we continue to see more cross-border deals, more interest from people wanting to get into the United States from Latin America, just due to tariffs and everything else. And we see the U.S. looking for other places. They used to go to China a lot, and now that's kind of fallen out of favor. So they're looking for what other countries can we go to have manufacturing, or whatever it might be. So you're seeing more people staying, within the U.S., staying closer to home. And I think Latin America offers up a huge opportunity for people that have, can be in the same time zones and quality of work and quality of employee and all those things. And you're not dealing with, different time zones and just different culture, completely different cultures and everything else. So I do see more activity being done within, the U.S. and in Latin America, both on both fronts.
Okay. What from your experience, why the CEO sometimes is the bottleneck? I've seen a lot of deals that the CEO is the bottleneck, and it's the hardest part to selling the company.
It is.
So what is the CEO doing, and how can you not be the bottleneck of the company?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's the toughest. It's one of the toughest chasms as a business owner that we've seen trying to get from one step to that next. It's a lot of people start as a really good technician and they're very talented in what they do. So they start a business in that talent, and they build it up and they can hire 5 or 10 people and they can get to a certain amount of revenue, and everything can still run through them. So they keep it, so they keep that high quality of service, or product. But at some point, they need to hire people and give them the autonomy to make decisions to run the company, and letting go of the vine, letting go of that to say, boy, what if they screw up? What if that, it's like, okay, yeah, that's going to happen. But they learn, if you have the right people, the right culture, you learn from that, you train them up. And that's like, I'll give you my specific example of Cornerstone. I grew the first year, started in 2001, it'd be 25 years in January. Had a profitable year first year, doubled the second year, doubled the third year, 50% up the fourth year, thinking, oh man, this is easy. And then I hit a ceiling.
Yeah.
And for the next 15 years, I was within a certain range of value. Not making money, but working my butt off and kind of in this range. I talked with some different folks like Vern Harnish and some other coaches, and found out that I really needed a number 2 person, a person that could be more detail oriented and stay in the office and follow up on the details. And I was not the nurturer, and I was not the people to hold people accountable. I was the strategist. I was the person seeing the new ideas, putting together the new strategies. I was landing the new business. I was not good to just sit in my office in the day-to-day. So I hired someone in that position, and the next year we doubled in sales.
Wow.
So it's just breaking through, because they don't want to put out a bad product or service, and they don't think anyone else can do it better than they can, which is not true. But we're just so scared. It's our baby. We built this from nothing. In the survey that we did, 76% of the business owners, we interviewed 750 business owners, and 76% of them founded their company because they could either found it, inherit it, buy it from their boss, or buy it from a third party. And 76 was founded. So now you've got this thing, you've created, you've birthed this thing out of nothing. It's like, man, no one can, I'm the only one that can take care of my baby. No one else can. And eventually you either keep it small or you figure out how to do that. Because if you don't find someone else to help make good strategic decisions on a day-to-day level, you'll never get to the size where you really need to be there, where you're going to be exciting to be sold. And that's where a lot of companies get stuck in that more Main Street level, small, sub 3 million, maybe, for sure it's 5 million in revenue. And they're just stuck there. It's a profitable business. They're making money, but it's not transferable because all routes lead through that business owner, whether it's the employees' questions, whether that's all the strategic partners, whether it's all the clients, it all comes through the business owner. And that's sad, because they can think that they're building this valuable business. And I've seen companies that had $1 million to $2 million in EBITDA. And at the end of the day, when we did evaluation, we looked at it like, it's not saleable. Like, what do you mean? I've got $2 million I'm making the bottom line. It's like, sorry, you're the business. And if you take 2 to 3 years, have someone like Daniel help you find a team and build that team. And it doesn't happen overnight. You can't just say, hire someone and go, here you go. Here's the job description. It takes time to transfer that tribal knowledge. But if you can do that, not only does it free you up to take time away from the company, it's just a better company. It's a more valuable company. So I took off the month of July for the first time in 27 years. And I'm taking off the month of December. And I let my team, and it's funny, if you have the right team, what I found, because I was worried, like, oh, geez, Scott's, screwing around with his family and taking vacation and everything else. So they're going to be like, why isn't he working here? How hard should I work? But they've actually, if you have the right team and the right culture, I've seen it be the complete opposite, where they take on that challenge. Like, let us prove to the owner, to Scott, how good we are or what we can do. And let's take pride in not having to call them once in a month. And we'll make those decisions as best as we can. We'll follow our values. And that really has helped me, and it helps other business owners when you have that right team. Because you're right, that is probably the number one reason why a lot of businesses never make it to the level where they can truly sell it, is because they are the business.
Okay, so how does the CEO need to change their mindset or capabilities to be able to sell successfully?
Yeah, I think it's you've got to think about building a business without you. If you were going away, how would you build this business without you? And also look at it from a competitor's hat of, how would I put myself out of business? What would I do to put Cornerstone out of business? And geez, if it's one or two things, well, you've got to fix those one or two things. But I think you've got to be able to trust people. You've got to be able to say, I'm going to save some money. I'm not going to take all the money out of the company. I'm going to invest in, it's interesting because people invest in machines, manufacturing companies. There's CapEx. You invest in machines all the time. And I got to get the newest and latest and greatest. And I got to continue to be more efficient by buying machines. But nobody invests that kind of money, or very few invest that kind of money into people, into training, into coaching. And it's like, well, what, if I ask any of my clients that are business owners, what's their biggest problem? It's not the machines running. It's not the suppliers delivering stuff anymore. It's almost always a people problem, or always can get tied to a people problem. So it's taking the time to train your team, especially your management team, and getting the right people on board, and bringing up, like we bring in outside coaches to help our people individually and as a company. And we found that reinvesting in our people is the best reinvestment that we can make, to not only build value and eventually have something to sell, but just to have a stronger business that, if God forbid anything happened to me, my wife and my kids know that there's a succession plan. There's people that can run the company. They can eventually sell it. They got a couple different options that they can do. But yeah, that is an issue that most people face, is just that fear of letting go and something going wrong, and they can't control everything anymore, and all those fun things that entrepreneurs and type A personalities typically have.
So what are the typical behaviors of a CEO that immediately raises red flags to a buyer?
Yeah, we get into a management presentation, and they ask, well, who has the relationships with the customers? I have the relationship with the customers. So who created this process? I created the process. So it's all I. There's no we.
Right. We're done. Okay.
Yeah. In fact, we had a client once, we talked about this. He had a strong ego, and not in a bad way. He was a brilliant man. But I said, well, who does this now? It's like, well, our team does. And he truly had a team that he built out, but he was so proud of what he built when he got into the first meeting. And that's why we always put the worst buyer first, not the best buyer. He couldn't help himself. He's like, what happened here? I did this. I did that. He's like, what about your management team? They're a bunch of idiots. They always got to come to me for everything. I'm like, he didn't even know what he was saying. He was having like an outer body experience. I'm like, you can't be saying that your people are idiots, because that's what they're buying, is those idiots. And they don't want to buy idiots. They want to buy well-trained, great employees. And so it's, when they take credit for everything, that's usually a bad sign that the buyer's probably going to walk away or offer a heck of a lot less.
So what is the main thing that the CEO needs to stop doing to make a company sellable? Sales, operation, relationship with clients? What's the main thing?
Yeah, really, it is probably the relationship with the customers, and making the day-to-day decisions. Like if all roads lead to Daniel, that's a bad thing. So, I even said, people will say, well, no, I don't do sales, but I just work with the top 5 customers. Well, the top 5 customers are 80% of the business. It's like, well, if I'm the top, instead of me going out alone, bring Daniel along, bring someone along. And now, hey, let me introduce you to Daniel. And now, if you can't get a hold of me, give Daniel a call. And then eventually now Daniel's the lead. And if then I'm around in the background, and it's just starting to build someone else out there that they at least have a relationship with and can go to, because that's the scariest thing for a buyer, is that if you, as the owner, have all the relationships with those customers, and you want to leave, which most do after 6 months or a year, unless they're rolling equity into a deal, it's just a scary place for a buyer, because again, you look at where's the biggest risk, and it's, relationships and revenue coming in. If revenue keeps coming in and keeps increasing, that can solve a lot of sins and solve a lot of problems. But if that stops and cash flows reduce significantly, no fault of the buyer, that's where problems, will come in. And that's where buyers will say, it's just not worth, this is a great company. The way it's, it's a nice company, good product or service, but it's just not worth the risk. And we're going to move on and put our investments into something else that we think we can get our arms around. And there's a management team there that we can back. That's what everybody wants to back, is who is that management team that you want to back? And if you're an owner and you are that person, that might be where you go, man, I see all these huge opportunities. It is where you maybe sell 70, 80% of the company, roll 20 or 30 equity over. Now you stick around for 5 years, but now there's a plan with that family office or that private equity group where you are going to build, they are going to help you professionalize that management team. So now you're like, okay, I can either do what I'm doing and make whatever I'm making, or take some chips off the table now while times are good, put that money away in case all hell breaks loose. My family's set up and we're all good to go. I've got no personal guarantees going forward, no more risk. And now I can really do the things I love to do and transfer over a 3 to 5 year period, all of this knowledge and all these relationships. And then you can exit at that second sale. And now you get that second bite of the apple and everybody wins. So that's usually when someone still has some gas in the tank, they're not burnt out. That's usually a pretty good opportunity to kind of get some money now, and also find a way to eventually, kind of have a set process to get out.
So, in scaling up, we talk about the 4 decisions: people, strategy, execution, and cash. Which one is the most important to raise evaluation?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it really depends. I mean, but I think cash is king. At the end of the day, it's what is EBITDA? Most companies are based off of a multiple of EBITDA. If it's recurring revenue, it's multiples of revenue. But most problems go back to people, So, I mean, I think they're all really important, but cash is king. If you're not making any money, why do I want to buy you? And if I do want to buy you, it's only for synergies, and there's be no big payday at the end of the day.
So let me get a little bit on valuation. You mentioned EBITDA, if you're a typical business, and if you're a recurring business, you could talk about times sales.
Correct.
So what is the main difference, and kind of what are the ranges, or what are you seeing in the market today?
Yeah, so I would say 95% of businesses are based off of cash flow, based off of EBITDA.
And they pay you 7 times EBITDA.
Yeah, and then if you're like a SaaS model, or the truly reoccurring revenue, where think of anything where you're paying 10 or $25 a month, and you don't even think about it, you're just paying it. Those companies are based off of revenues of multiples of EBITDA, or I'm sorry, multiples of revenue. So you're thinking a lot of more of your tech related companies are more revenue based, and it's really just how well can you predict the future cash flow or revenue stream, where people are paying you a subscription model. You can predict that. You can look at what's the attrition rates over the last couple of years, how much are they growing new customers, what's the cost to get a new customer, and you can really very, very predictable and understandable. That'll get multiples of revenue. But in a service company, in a distribution, manufacturing company, it's typically like that. You might have a lot of repeat customers in orders, but you don't know if you're getting 10 this month or 30 this month, or they're going to take a month off because they're slow on their end or whatever else it might be. So those companies are typically based more on EBITDA. And we've seen multiples, when you looked at what's a traditional multiple back in, I've been again 27 years ago, a lot of the smaller companies, a couple million EBITDA were in that 3 to 5 times EBITDA range. I would say that's right now the whole, kind of the whole rising tide lifts all boats. And that's at probably 4 to 6. It's moved up a whole multiple. But I've seen companies that we're talking to right now. We just talked to a client in the education space where they do credentialing and professional services, that we talked about a 10 to 14 multiple of EBITDA.
Wow.
So there's, I would say, as we roll into 2026, looking at Latin America, looking at all the Americas, we see a very active marketplace. We think that there's been so many distractions, so many uncertainties with, just looking at the Americas, tariffs and interest rates and political unrest or political issues and everything else, and wars going on worldwide. That so much of that has either kind of resolved itself, or we've just become kind of numb to it. It's like, okay, that's there, but it's been there for 3 years. We don't care anymore. And I believe, again, that 2021, early 22 is the best 12, 18 months I've ever seen in 27 years. I truly believe 26 for Latin America and Americas could be that kind of a year. We just see a lot of pent up demand. You look at the demographics again from our survey, the ages were 45 to 75 and they had to do at least 5 million in revenues to get into the survey. And we asked them, when ideally would you like to get out of your business? When you sell, exit, however you want to get out. And the study showed that 48% said they would ideally like to exit in 3 years or less.
Wow.
So that's half the business owners. And that was in January 2025. So we're almost a year, coming up on a year on that survey. So that gives us 2 years. And we are seeing that nationally and even more so with our Cornerstone International Alliance. We're seeing on an international basis, our investment bankers are talking to more sellers. There's more interest. Yeah. So as part of it's just the demographics. There's a lot of business owners around that quote unquote retirement age. But I think also people have been in it going, hey, there's some pretty good multiples going on right now. There's more buyers than there are sellers. There's a lot of money all throughout the world, probably more than in the trillions of dollars that you just haven't seen before. So it's that, kind of econ 101 supply, law of supply and demand. There's more buyers, there's more money, less good quality sellers. So we're getting, so the sellers are winning. They're getting higher valuations as a whole. In fact, on average, most years we get about, with our process that we run, we get about 4 to 5 offers per client. Last year, and what we're looking at this year, including all the different LOIs that we have right now, we've averaged about 9 or 10 offers per client the last 18 months. So it's doubled what the normal is, just because there's so few. Last year was just volume was down. We did less deals last year. But again, volume down, buyers still have to put money to work. They're still trying to grow. They're still trying to invest. So there's more of them bidding, and a lot of them are moving down market. So if you've got a client, most of our clients are in that 1 to 25 EBITDA space, but especially in that 2 or 3 to 10 to 12 space, that's really active, because a lot of the bigger companies, a lot of these big private equity groups can't get, they bought in 21, 22 or 20 when the multiples were really high at that time. Yep. And now they're trying to get that return for their customers or their investors. And they weren't able to get in the last year or two because it just wasn't at the high value. It was lesser exciting. And so they're spending more time, taking longer to invest in these companies, and they're buying kind of what they call buying down the multiple. They might have paid a crazy high multiple for the platform, and now they're still paying above market for these smaller companies, but it's still not at the level of what a $20 million EBITDA comes for if they're buying $5 and $6 million EBITDA companies. So that's what they're trying to do, is buy more of these smaller companies, add it to their platform, and then eventually get out at a good return for their investors. So we believe the low middle market's going to be, again, really, really strong internationally this year as well.
So what's the minimum size of company that you take to market, or that you see interest in the market?
Yeah, our bottom minimum is $1 million in EBITDA, but ideally, or most likely, it'd be $2 million in EBITDA. There's just a threshold of $2 million in EBITDA that opens up this whole world of buyers. Some are coming down to under 2 million, up to $1 million. So yeah, I would say if you're sitting at $1.7 million right now, and you're kind of tired, I would say, again, do whatever you got to do, kind of dig deep, take that last breath. You see the finish line, and run it for a year or two, get it over that $2 million threshold, and then go to market. Because there literally will be buyers like, it's at 1.9, can't look at it. Well, if it's at at 2 million, yep, we'll look at it. But there's literally a threshold that some will not drop below $2 million. And if you're at 850 or 900, work your butt to get it over $1 million, because you'll get, there's different thresholds. And then you get over 5 million and there's another threshold. You get over 10 million, there's another threshold in EBITDA. But I would say
the minimum EBITDA to be looked at from a decent buyer is 2 million EBITDA.
Yeah, I think that's the number. That's where again, you can look lower, but if you're sub $1 million, it's really tough. It's a tough spot to be in from from a private equity or family office base. You might look at some smaller strategics, but wow, $1 million, $2 million and above is really where the market gets interested.
All right, awesome. Regarding growth, what kind of growth rates they're looking? 20, 30%? What's the growth rate you need to have for someone to get excited about?
Yeah, it's, I don't know if I'd put a percentage on it. I mean, if you had 10 or 20% growth rates year over year for the last couple of years, that would be great. Again, what we see, what the market sees, if you can get someone to get 30, 40% the last several years, outstanding. Like you will have, how many offers do you want? Kind of a thing, because what happens is most people get in their business and they grow, then it kind of levels off. And then they it's like, and it's funny because what we asked in this survey, we said, why would you not want to sell your business? What's the number one reason why you want to sell your business? And it was, I'm doing so well, I'm making so much money. Why would I ever want to sell now?
Yep.
And then they go over that S curve. And then they go, oh, now I'm bored, I'm tired, I'm sick, I don't want to do this anymore. It's like, well, I want this value. Well, no, it's not worth that value anymore. It's worth a heck of a lot less because you've crested that S curve and you're flat, or you're even decreasing a little bit. But yeah, if you can show for 2 to 3 years, you got 10, 20% or more growth. And I think the bigger thing besides just growth is, what is your EBITDA margin? What is that normalized EBITDA margin? Most buyers, and again, each industry is different, but across the board, most buyers that we talk to want to see at least a 10% EBITDA margin. Yeah, ideally 15, move it to 20. But because if you're doing 100 million and you're dropping 2 million to the bottom line, that's a lot of work and a lot of growth that you got to get to 3 million, and a lot of people problems, and it's just not worth it. So you'd rather be doing 50 million with a 15% EBITDA margin than 100 million with a 5% EBITDA margin. Yeah. Even though the EBITDA is about the same, they'll get a lot more interest in the other.
Yeah, but if you're doing 10 million and 2 million EBITDA, that'll be an interesting company to look at.
That's right. Yeah, that would be very interesting. And showing, the other thing would be is yes, we've sold the low cost leaders and things along that line, but typically those companies are not near as saleable as ones that, there's a reason why I'm paying Daniel $10 when I could pay $7.
Yep.
The market's $7, but I'm paying Daniel 10. What is that secret sauce in the quality of service, product, whatever it is that I'm paying more? People love that because now you're widening that moat, that differential of why you're different, why you win business from your competition. So if you're below market, if the market's to 10% and you're at 9 or 8, that's not going to be looked at well in the marketplace. You want to try to be above your industry average, whatever that is in the marketplace. So I would almost look at more at what are the EBITDA margins and EBITDA growth rates, then, hey, let's just go after sales because everybody talks sales. Look, I grew 40% a year, but I'm making the same amount of EBITDA or maybe even less just because we're taking on products, just to trade dollars, and that doesn't make any sense at the end of the day.
So let's talk about the leadership team. What do they look in a leadership team when they buy a company? What kind of characteristics or strength or whatever they see in a leadership team?
Yeah, they would like a proven team that's been there for a handful of years. It's not like you hired the team this month and in 6 months from now you're going to sell and go, hey, look, I got a management team. Well, yeah, they've been there for 6 months. So I would say someone that oversees the operations, someone oversees sales, kind of your COO, your some oversees sales, and your CFO. Those three are kind of the key people, because now I know I got somebody on sales, or better yet, I have a team on sales and someone's overseeing it, though it's not just one person. I've got a competent CFO. I would say that the CFO role, what people call the CFO role, is usually the weakest link of the team. It's usually a bookkeeper or a controller at best. It's not truly a CFO. It's someone that's doing the books, but not really looking at this from a strategic point of view of how, of what all the margins are, and breaking down your product lines and divisions by, what's the gross profit margin for each of your products and lines and customers and everything else. So, but those would be the big three, operations, sales, and finance. And if you have those three, they're solid. They've been around for, 5 years or more. They've proven the growth rate. Like, why has this happened? Oh, the team has been here. Like I had a client that once that we took the market, and we actually were having a management presentation, and the guy was in Africa hunting on a safari for a month, right in the middle of the process.
Yeah.
And we weren't real excited about it, but he's like, look, I planned this thing years ago. I'm doing it. But what it proved is, he goes, by darn it, we had our best month we've ever had in our life. And I wasn't there. Maybe I should go away for another month.
I imagine they love that.
Yeah, buyer was like, you weren't here this last month, and we had all this due diligence going on, and you were, and you had your best month. Yeah, they were like all over that company. Now, again, I don't recommend taking a month off during the diligence process, because very few companies are built like that. But to do it earlier, to be able to show, yeah, every year I take off X month, or I take off 2 months, or I take off 2 weeks, and they handle everything. Those kinds of stories really bring confidence to the buyers, because again, it shows that you don't just say you have a good team, like you really trust them, like you've been gone for a extended period of time, and the company continued to run. The car didn't go off a cliff, while you were gone, or the house didn't start on fire.
Okay, how about the strategic clarity, purpose, priorities, competitive advantage, all those kind of things? How important are for a business and evaluation?
Yeah, I think they're really important. I think having the right strategy, because again, what they're buying, when we put together the sim, we're telling the history of the story. We're telling all the great things, your management team, why you win business, what your product or services are, the marketplace. We're also talking about what the future is, and because that's really what any buyer's buying. They're buying the future cash flow of this company. That's what they're paying for. And if you have a great strategy that I can see and I really buy into, and I can see that for the last 5 years, 3 years, you put together a strategy and your team's achieved it. You put together a strategy, your team's achieved it. That again, the lower the risk for me as a buyer, the higher the multiple, or the higher the value I pay. When I know your team has set goals and achieved them, I get really excited. And to have, I've seen it more and more now with coaches are putting in different KPIs. What are the 3 to 5 KPIs that are lagging and forward-looking indicators that can really help you make the right decision, or know where your company's at, and in tracking those in a system like Align or one of the other ones, 90 of the others that are out there. It really, again, it just gives them confidence, because they could go back and look and say, okay, does this group hit their goals or not? How are they KPIs? Are they red all day long? Are they green all day long? What does it look like? So to be able to dial in that strategy and really understand that, but also I think most buyers now are looking to it. What's the soul of the company, or what's the values of this company? Does that align with their values? Because you could have one that's very dictatorial, very authoritative, and one that's much more democratic and leadership team decision making. Neither one's right or wrong, but if you try to put two companies like that together, it's probably somebody's not going to have fun, and someone's going to leave or get fired in a short period of time. So they want to understand, what is the culture? How do you make your decisions? How have you grown the company? And then what are the strategies to take this thing to the next level and double and triple and 10x, 10x the company?
Okay. Can you walk me through in a couple of minutes of the sales process? So what's a typical sales process for a business owner who has no idea, just to get a sense of what will be the process?
Yeah. So I'll start from the first phone call to the closing table, and I'll try to hit those points. And I can send you over a document if you want to attach to this that will kind of highlight that. But the first step is someone having the conversation with the owner, or the conversation asking their trusted advisor, hey, I've been doing this for X years. I'm thinking about doing something different. What are my options? What is my value and everything else? So that just starts the conversation. And they go, yeah, I'm thinking about getting out in the next 5 years, or, I've never had a valuation or RMA. I should probably get that done. That leads to the trusted advisor, the coach, calling someone like Cornerstone, the investment banker, and saying, hey, let's just have a discovery call. It's confidential. There's no cost. There's no obligation. Let's just have a call. And on that call, what we typically do is usually 60, sometimes 90 minutes, but most times 60 minutes. We'll take about 20 minutes or so, understand, what is their company? What are their goals? What are they trying to achieve? What's the scenario today? So that way, once we understand that, we can answer their questions better. But then we'll get into what is the process. It might, whatever questions, there's nothing that's off limits. So it could be, how long does this take? Is it a good time? What's going on in my market? What's going on in M&A? What are, what's this cost? What does the process look like? Who do I need on my team? What are the value drivers? What are my different options? Because most of them think I'm going to call my competitor down the street or I'm going to give it to my kids.
Yep.
But those might be the two worst options out of all the options. In my book, Finish Strong, I have about 9 or 10 different options. And there's all these kind of variations of, hey, if you want to do it, we've seen a lot of folks will go, well, I'd love to have my son or daughter or kids in the business, but, I don't know if they're the right fit. And, oh, geez, even if I think they're the right fit, they're going to pay me over 7 to 10 years. And what happens if they screw up? What happens if the competition comes in and knocks them out? Now, I worked for 35 years and I don't get paid on my value. And now it's not going to be fun to see Junior at Christmas anymore or whatever holiday.
The risk.
The seller's taking all the risk for the kids. So what we've seen is going, hey, why don't we find a private equity or family office that believes in your culture, believes in your values, sees where you're going, give some equity to the kids before or at the sale period. Now the kids have no personal guarantees. You have no personal guarantees. You get paid 80, 90% of cash up front. Your kids have some meaningful equity going forward, and they can learn from this group. They can help professionalize the company together. And in 5, 10 years, whatever it might be, they sell the company again. And if it's family office, they could hold it for 10 or 20 years. But now they kind of get the best of both worlds. They got their money up front, and they were allowed to have their kids have some equity in the company. And what we've seen even more recently is where they sell the business to a third party, get full value in today's great M&A marketplace, and then say, okay, son or daughter, what do you want to be? What are you passionately excited about? Well, Dad, thank God, because Daniel, I really wasn't very excited about your manufacturing company, but boy, there's some really cool technology stuff that I've been working on, and I'd love to do something there. Also, now you see this passion start to come out of them, because otherwise they feel like my mom or dad, want me to take over. I take it over on guilt, and this is the last thing I ever want to do as a kid. Or mom and dad give it to them, and they have no right. Just because they're the son or daughter doesn't mean they're wired the same way that the owner is, and they have zero expertise in this space. And you're either going to build a management team around them just to insulate them, and then they're eventually going to get sick of babysitting the kids. And it's not a good recipe for, in most cases. So, but yeah, a lot of variations of how we can get to those options. So it's have the conversation, have that discovery call, learn about your different options. And then if you haven't had any kind of evaluation done recently, which 95% of companies out there in Latin America and everywhere else have not had evaluation done recently. And what I would say about evaluation, so that's the next step, is what we call the RMA, the real market analysis. And this is going to sound self-serving, of course, but I would strongly recommend you work with an investment bank like Cornerstone, who understands the M&A marketplace, understands your size of company. They don't need to be an expert in, I've done 100 X industries in your space. They need to say, if they do companies in that $1 to $25 million range and they've done a lot of them, that's probably good enough. They don't have to be an expert in your industry, but understand what is the value of the company. And this is where it gets tricky, because, you can hire some different firms, and a lot of them will do a formulaic version of evaluation, which is very, very common. And again, not wrong, but a lot of them will use the discounted cash flow method. Well, what does that look like? It's asking the entrepreneur, asking the owner, what are the next 5 or 10 years going to look like for you? And show me any entrepreneur that doesn't say it's going to go like this for the next 5 or 10 years. They don't plan in any kind of slumps or, we're going to lose a customer 5 years from now. Or we're going to have COVID's going to happen or anything else. So they put this thing on this skyrocketing, and then the valuation discounts it back to today's dollars. And because the owner gave them such crazy projections, the numbers are way out of whack. So what we do is we look at it from what's real. That's why we call it the RMA, the real market analysis. We're looking at what are other companies, once we understand your company and normalize EBITDA and really dive in deep with your company, what have other companies of similar size and scope, what have they actually sold for? What have they transacted at? That's kind of step number one. And we can see what are people actually writing checks for. Then we look at, again, all on a confidential level, we'll go out and, because of our Cornerstone International Alliance, we have over 200 investment banks all over the world. So we can call some of those that have done deals in this space as well. We have another proprietary database. So we could talk to these industry experts and say, hey, what are you seeing in this space? And now we're talking to people that are doing deals from the M&A side in the trenches today. What are they seeing? And then if we need to, we'll also go out to buyers actually in the marketplace, again, on a confidential, very generic basis going, hey, Danielle, I know you're in the, the plastic injection molding space, or you're looking to buy in that space. I've got a client doing, 50, 60 million in sales, 5 to 10 in EBITDA, decent management team, located in Latin America. If we go to market, I'll make sure to let you know, but what are you seeing for multiples in that space? And they don't want to shoot you real high because they don't want to set false expectations if they do go to market. And they also don't want to shoot real low because I always tell them that we're talking to multiple people like yourself. So they're going to shoot us a range, and so now we take the range of what buyers are saying, what our industry experts are saying, and what we're seeing of actual deals getting done in the last few years. And we triangulate in, and that's the value that we come up with. So it's as real as we can humanly come up with. It's not sticking something into a computer model and punch in a couple numbers and it kicks out something. And it's not formulaic based. It's kind of part science, part art, and really pulling that together. So we have a team that does that. It takes about 3 weeks to do the RMA. So that's the first step is let's understand what that real market analysis is. So let's just say it's $50 million. Well, who cares? What am I going to net out of this thing? If I got 49 million in debt and $1 million in fees and I get zero, probably not a good time to sell my business. So if you can say, well, I'm going to net out $20 million after debt and everything else. Okay, so I got 20 million bucks. That sounds like a lot, or it could not sound like a lot. I don't know what that means to me and my family until I sit down. So you sit down with your tax team, your tax attorney, your CPAs, figure out what the net number is and how you can save money. There's usually ways you can save not just some money, significant hundreds of thousands, not millions of dollars by preparing early on that 2 to 3 year window or more. And then you say, okay, what's sitting down with your financial advisor? What we call it the lifestyle number. CPA group calls it the wealth gap. But what is my lifestyle number? My lifestyle number is 25 and my net number is 20. Well, I got two choices. I either lower my lifestyle down to 20 and know what that looks like and be excited about that because I'm burnt out, tired, sick, and I don't want to do it anymore. Or I go, okay, I've got a $5 million gap. And in the RMA that we did, we're going to point out the top 2 to 3 things that they can do to enhance the value the most. And then we talk about getting a scaling up coach to work on those things because they can get there faster, better, sooner. And then every year we'll update it at no cost. So that way, so we just go through those steps. So before they ever make a decision, we talk about this critical 3-legged stool is what is the real value of my company? What is my net number? What am I going to net out after the sale? And then what's my lifestyle number? What is the lifestyle I want to live? And if I can live my ideal lifestyle, why would you wait? Why would you wait? Because you can always stay on and work for the company if you really need to work.
In the RMA it says, hey, you're missing, let's say 10 million.
Right.
If you lose these 3 things in the next 2 or 3 years, the probability of it be worth 10 more million is going to get
correct. There. Yeah. And that's just it. There's only a handful of levers that you can pull, and it's growing sales. It's growing EBITDA. It's minimizing risk. It's building out the culture. It's building out the management team. There's a handful of things. And that's where a coach, just having someone there that holds you accountable and has seen it before and worked with other clients before. Because what I've seen is that these business owners get in their 4 walls and they just get stuck and they don't see some of the other things that are out there or other opportunities. And yeah, so that's where those are the 3 things you do. So once you understand those 3 numbers, then it's either A, I go to value enhancement and I work with my coach, or B, I go to what we call, that's where we would sign an agreement. If we go to B, that the numbers make sense. Now I want to go to markets. So now we signed an agreement with Cornerstone, and that would be our engagement agreement. Then over the next month or so, the things we're going to be working on is telling the story. So we call it a SIM, a confidential information memorandum. We'd be interviewing the client. Takes 3 to 4 hours to interview the client, and they get us a bunch of information. But we're just telling that story again, putting the company in the absolute best possible light. And at the same time, we brainstorm with the client. And then we have our analysts and associates. We have a team of usually 5 or 6 that work on every deal that will do the research of who are the right buyers. Is it a domestic buyer? Is it an international buyer? Is it a private company, public company, family office, private equity platform, private equity roll-up, and so many others. But those are the main groups. And we'll spend 50 or 100 hours or more researching who are the best buyers. And then what our next step would be is that to sit down with the client and they physically read everything and sign off on everything. So every single page they'll sign of the SIM, all the buyers they'll look at and go, I don't care. All the buyers look good, but ABC company, I don't care if they pay double. I would never sell to them because I just don't like them. Okay, but then we blacklist them and take them off the list. But so before we talk with a single soul and go to quote unquote market, the seller knows exactly what we're talking, how we're positioning the company, what the stories we're telling, what that growth opportunities are, and then who we're going to go to, and what our whole process is. So that takes about a month or so. Could be a little longer depending on how quickly they can get us the information. And then once we go to market, where a lot of investment banks, if it's only one person working the deal, that could be 3, 6, 9 months of being in market, which is scary because everybody wants to, you don't want to breach confidentiality, and it's a lot of, you kind of living in this limbo world that's not good for anybody. Am I going to get an offer? Am I not going to get an offer? Is it going to be at my value? Am I not? And you just don't know what you don't know. So with our team, when we go to market, it's 30 to 60 days we're in market. So no more than 60 days. So once they sign off, it's short. So in that time frame, because we've done the 100 plus hours up front of finding out who these buyers are, why they should buy, what the synergies are, who the right person is, what their contact information is. So now it's all proactive. It's not this reactive shotgun approach of let's throw up on a listing board, like real estate, and see who's going to call us. We proactively know who the buyers are and in what order we're going to call them. And we put our team on that. So when we get interest, we get them to sign an NDA, then they get the SIM. So no one's going to find out who the business is until they sign an NDA. They get the NDA, get the SIM, we answer their questions, and then we say, okay, by 2 weeks from now, whatever the date is, all IOIs are due, indications of interest. If you don't get in by then, you're out. Because that's where, that's the excitement of what we really do very well is with our Assurance 360 process, is something that we call POMO, the power of multiple offers, because that's where that's the only way the seller is going to get leverage. Because if you can imagine, Daniels, this, is that buyers look at 3,000 to 5,000 deals a year and do 3, 5, 10 deals a year. The seller's got one chance in their life to sell something that they've never sold before. Yep. So the buyer's got all the leverage. And if they get one-on-one, which is what they want, the buyer wants to get one-on-one with the seller, because now the buyer controls the timing. The buyer controls how many questions they can ask. The buyer controls the flow of information. The buyer controls everything, including the value. And when you can get it to where we're calling the shots on timing, now we're creating urgency. Now we're creating scarcity. We're creating this competitive situation where these buyers know that there's no asking price, and they know they're in a competing environment, that if they don't put their best foot forward, they're going to miss out on this opportunity. It's not going to be like, well, I can put an offer in today. I'll lowball Daniel, and if it doesn't work, I'll come back a year from now and see if, I'll try again next year. It's like, nope, if you don't put a good offer in today, you're going to miss this opportunity. There's no chance it's not going to sell. That's the mentality that we want these buyers to think. So then once we get the IOIs in, we'll review them with our seller, and typically the next week or at the latest the week after, we're going to bring in 3 to 5 groups that the seller thinks are the best. So it might be the higher value ones. It could be the better culture fits. It's whatever is important to the seller. We bring in, so like I said, if last year we had 10 offers per client, we're going to narrow that down to 3 to 5 to bring in for like a half-day meeting. And we're going to vet the buyer more. The buyer's going to vet us more. It's the first time they're going to sit face-to-face, probably the first time they ever talked. Sometimes we'll do a call before the IOI, but many times the buyer will never even talk to the seller, because we want the seller staying laser focused on running their business, because what they're going to put all the value, if not at least most of the value, is on the last 12 months. So the most important 12 months of your 40-year career of being a business owner are the last 12. That's why it's so important to sell before they're burnt out and tired, because we see people do this and this for decades, and then do this and lose 30, 40, 50% of the value, or the company's not saleable at all because they just held on too long. And then once we get that, so now so it's about 2 months, let's just say, and getting the offers, another month and a half of negotiating down getting the LOIs, negotiating the LOI. And then now once we get exclusive, now we got 60 to 90 days to close. So all in, our average, I think last year was 7 months from start to finish. I would say the short time frame is 5 to 6 months, and the higher side is around 8 months. Is the full time frame. Now the national or international time frame that we've seen out there is probably closer to a year, because again, most brokers or investment advisors don't use a team. They use one person, and one person can only do so much so quickly, and so it drags out. And what we've always found is time kills all deals. Only bad things happen the longer things go out. So you really want to cut corners, but you want to keep things moving efficiently. So this is the hot potato. This is the priority for all these buyers. This is what they're fighting over, creating this frenzy versus, well, it's slowed down and I don't know if they're really going to move or not and everything else. So those are some things. So it's the first part of it is understanding the numbers. What is the three-legged stool? What's my real value, net number, lifestyle number? And then let's prepare and tell the right story. So what is the story we're going to tell? To what buyers are we going to tell it to? That's about a month. And then 1 or 2 months to go to market, get the offers, negotiate down to one buyer, about 1 to 2 months, and then 2 to 3 months to close is kind of that time frame.
Okay, got it. The only thing that I think we miss in preparation to sell is the legal and financial advice. Mm-hmm. So tell me about legal advice and financial advice in preparation for the sale.
Yeah, on the preparation side, again, there's a lot of stuff that can be done on the tax side of things before you get an LOI. Once you get an LOI or an offer, there's a lot of things that kind of come off the table. So there's a lot of things you can do, especially selling stock to the next generation at a low value and all kinds of other things that you can do. But yeah, tax wise, and also from a financial standpoint, as you can imagine, there's due diligence done on everything. But the thing obviously that gets the most diligence are the financials. Yep. It's got to be strong, because if you've got financials that can't stand up to the test, yep, everybody's going to get excited, and then the deal's going to retrade, or we call it the seller's going to take a haircut. And it's going to be at the 11th and a half hour, a week before close, and go, well, I thought you're going to get 30 million, but your EBITDA is really not X, it's Y, and we'll pay 18. We close next week, but we're not paying
and
you 30.
How can you make sure that does happen? Should audit them with an international? What's the standard?
Yeah, I would look at. There's two different things you can do. One is do audits, and ideally, 3 years, ideally 5, but at least 3 years with the audited financials by a reputable firm. It can't be, well, I can get a good deal from the guy down the street who's working out of his house. It can't be that guy. It's got to be it doesn't need to be a top 4 firm either, but it's got to be a regional reputable firm. And then what other people are doing, or in addition to, or if you don't do the audits, is what we call a sell side QOV, or quality of earnings report. So basically what you're going to do, and you'll spend, again, it varies depending on the size of the company and the country and everything else, but $25,000 to $60,000, maybe more, maybe less, but probably not less. And it takes about a month or so, maybe sometimes more. But what you're going to do is basically you're going to hire someone to work for you to do exactly what the buyer is going to do. They're going to go into your books and they're going to do all this QB. They're going to look at timing of revenue, timing of expenses, working capital needed for the business, all of these things. So if anything pops up that, hey, there's a red flag, we can either solve it before you go to market, or know that's going to be an issue and then get ahead of it and put it right into the sim. Like, hey, look, here's what we're doing. Here's what it is. We've not recorded this correctly. We understand it. If that's an issue, then just get out now, because I'd rather have you get out now and only work with buyers that are okay with that issue, versus working with all these buyers and then they find that out at the 11th hour. And now you're retrading the deal and you spent a bunch of money with all your advisors and you got to start over because the buyer walked from the deal. So yeah, QOV or audit it. And then on the legal side, you really want to get your legal house in order as well. So finding, your corporate attorney, but also at that time, finding what we call an M&A attorney as well. I think that's probably the of all the advisors, the one that gets misused the most, or that people bring in the wrong advisor for, is the attorney. They go, well, I've got an attorney. He or she's helped me start my company up 30 years ago. They set up my LLCs. They've done some collections for me. They help me with some client issues, help me with some employee issues. They know me better than anybody else. They come to all my Christmas parties or whatever it might be. And they're generalists. They are really good and they're really nice people and they're really smart, but they're not the specialists in M&A, and they will get torn apart by these big legal M&A firms that come in on the buy side. And I liken it to, when I speak around the world, I liken it to saying, you get an annual physical every year from your general doctor. So you go every year, he or she gives you the physical, you're comfortable with them, or, it's been 30 years. They know your body better than anybody else, hands down. You're comfortable with them. They're comfortable with you. You talk about whatever else. They know the family. And all of a sudden you've been having a lot of headaches. So you go to your doctor, he or she runs a scan, and you got a brain tumor in your head. And you need to operate. You need to have brain surgery. Now, your doctor of 30 years is a doctor. He could or she could go under the knife and say, yeah, I could try it. Never done it before, But I'm a doctor. I could try to figure it out as I go. I study for it. I'll study before the exam. Or you go to the brain surgeon that he or she, that's all they do on Tuesdays and Thursdays is brain surgery every single week for the last 20 years. And then you go back to your general doctor for checkups. And that's what you need is you need that M&A attorney. It's not saying that your attorney's dumb or you're firing your attorney. They need to be a part of the deal because they know they have a lot of the legal documents already, but it's bringing in that M&A attorney and having them at the table early enough so we can talk about structuring things and everything else. And the only other thing I would say from the legal standpoint is looking at your contracts. Are they assignable or not? Can you truly assign them? Are your, non-competes in most places are not what they used to anymore, but is your legal house in order? Do you have your IP? I see a lot of people think that they own their IP when they really don't, or is it, they put a TM there, but they never got it trademarked or registered. And the buyers care about that stuff because that's part of the value. What I'm getting those trademarked, those names that I can use. And if all of a sudden someone else comes in and goes, hey, I'm using that name now. Well, wait a second, we got that. Well, no, you never filed for it. So have an attorney look at all the IP and make sure that they own it. I've seen people where they said, oh yeah, this third party website group did our website and did all this cool stuff. And yeah, we own all that code or the quoting software. Yeah, we own all that. And you look at the fine print, it's like, nope, you get a license to use it, but they own it. Yep. And it's like, so then you got to go to them, buy it out before it becomes a big deal. Because if you're at the closing table and you're trying to buy out, guess what? They know the price is going up significantly because they're the only thing standing between you and a $30 million deal. They're not going to be very nice and say, oh yeah, sure, here it is for free, Daniel. They're gonna be like, well, for $1 million. And you're like, oh my God, I could have bought it for $100,000, a month ago. And so, yeah, I would think that's the biggest thing is the IP and just contracts and anything else, your corporate minutes, most people don't track on an annual basis, but you get those couple things in place and you'll be a heck of a lot further ahead than most.
Awesome. Let's talk about strategic sell against a financial sell, right? I made famous the Rembrandt in the Attic story.
Yes.
In Latin America. I've talked about it in several podcasts and people love it.
Yes.
So tell me what's the difference of a financial sell and strategic sell. And if you could kind of tell the story of what's the difference of having someone buy your company strategically and why it's so important.
Yeah. So a financial buyer is basically going to say, okay, Daniel, you've got your company, you're making $3 million in EBITDA. You want to retire. Okay, I'll come in and I'll run the company or I'll put someone in your place. And there's really no synergies there. So whatever quote unquote fair market is, in that 4 to 6 range we were talking before, a 4 to 6, and you could maybe get an 8 or 9. Well, you're going to be somewhere in that 4 to 6 range of multiples of EBITDA because that's kind of what quote unquote fair market is. And there's no real synergies. There's no real cost savings that I get as the buyer. There's no, I don't know anything about your industry, so I'm going to learn from you. And there's nothing that I'm bringing to the table where 1 + 1 = 3. So all I can pay is basically what is the current cash flow? What can the current cash flow support from a debt service standpoint over the next 5 years? And that's what I can pay. So it's not a bad value, but it's not an exciting value. It's not a premium that you can get out there in the marketplace. And that's why we create this POMO by getting multiple offers, because when you look at a synergistic buyer, well, now it's not just I'm buying your $3 million EBITDA company with maybe I'm selling a similar product, but a different product to the same customer. So now I can cross-sell all of your customers, my product or service, and vice versa. And, we saw that in I've got 2 different stories just to kind of give you an idea of the synergistic buyers. So we had a window washing company that we were selling. So they didn't do, 1 or 2 stories, but like 2 to 20 story buildings they did in Wisconsin. And they were basically in the central part of the state and up into the Northeast a little bit. And we talked to a lot of different buyers, and there was one buyer that was basically in the eastern third of the state doing janitorial services for for a lot of office buildings. So they were on the inside doing all the janitorial work for similar sized buildings. And they were trying to get over to Madison and Wausau and all these other places, but they couldn't get there because, they weren't from there. They were the outsiders. So they tried for years to get over. They couldn't really make any inroads. So now they bought this company. Well, now they're going, hey, we own this company. They've been doing window washing forever for you. By the way, we do janitorial services. We can give you a better deal if we do both. And over here, hey, now we can wash your windows too. We've been doing janitorial. They paid a crazy premium for this thing, like 30, 40% more than any other buyer. I think we had 8 offers on the company, and they're killing it. They're absolutely killing it. So another story more recently we had was a client had come to us through their trusted advisor and said, hey, I got 2 buyers interested in my business. I want to use you. I've been told to use you guys to help, bring other buyers to the table and make sure we don't leave any money on the table. I said, yeah, we can absolutely do that. We can move fast. And it said, yeah, these buyers are banging down our door. We don't know what to do. We want to sell. We're tired. We're burnt out. That was on a Friday. Well, somewhere between Friday at 5 o'clock and Sunday at 2 o'clock, the owners got really smart and said, you know what? We have the top 2 best buyers in the industry. We know them. I've been in the industry for 40 years. I've been on all the national boards. I know everything about this industry. Why do I need Cornerstone? And I said, wow. I can't force you to work with us. I said, I can bring Pomo. I can bring Power Multiple Offers. We know this is all that I do. I couldn't run your company. This is what I do. And they said, you know what? We want you to do an RMA. We want to have you do the RMA, which again takes about 3 weeks. We expedited it. We got it done in 2 weeks. And, but we're going to take it ourselves, we think. I said, okay. So the first offer came in the next week because they've been talking for months at that point in time. And it came in at $31 million, $26 million to close, $5 million to seller note over 5 years. And then there was an earnout of maybe $5 million over the next couple of years, but the seller's like, there's no way we're going to hit that. So it's a $31 million offer. Next week, we expedited the RMA, got it done in 2 weeks. That came in at $43.3 million. And I said, hey, look, you're leaving money on the table. He's like, yeah. That was the second biggest buyer. We've got the biggest buyer with the most synergies, the most everything coming to the table. And they're going to give us the best offer because they've got the most money, the most synergies, everything else. Well, they came to the table, again, one-on-one. We weren't involved. They're thinking, they're really looking at this as a financial buyer because they're going to try to steal this company. We came in at 43.3. The first offer was 31 million. They came in, taken out to 2 amazing dinners, pumped up their egos, told them how great they were. $25 million.
Oh.
$25 million. We said, look, can we please run? They're trying to steal your company. Can we please run a process where it can create urgency and scarcity and create Pomo? They said, fine. If you think you get 43, you got like 2 weeks. Now that's an extremely short period of time. Like we talked about, it's usually 5 to 8 months. And in 10 days, we went out because we talked with some financial buyers and they weren't going to pay up. They just like, look, we can pay this multiple about what the others were going to pay. So what was happening is these synergistic buyers were trying to act like a financial buyer and pay about a 4 to 5 multiple. And that got you to about the $30 million mark, or $25 to $30 million mark, because there's about a $6 million EBITDA company. We found a synergistic buyer that we said, hey, look, you have got a company that's adjacent to you. It's a great fit. And here are all the reasons why it's a fit, reduction in overhead, growth, all these things. I said, if you don't want to buy this company, I can tell you it is going to sell. It's going to sell to one of your 2 biggest competitors. And instead of having your headquarters solidified and growing out, you're going to be fighting in your backyard all day long. And it's going to be a huge distraction. It's going to hurt your growth, all the other areas that you want to grow in. I said, but you got to come in high. Otherwise, it's not even worth their time. Because again, they had no idea where the other offers came in at. And I told them they had to pay, if they didn't start with an 8 multiple, it wasn't even, I'm not even taking their phone call. So in 10 days, I called the owner and I said, we've got a LOI I think you want to sign. It's like, oh, did you get the 43.3? He said, no, we didn't get in the 40s. It's like, well, did you get high 30s? Yeah, because at least more cash at close. Because I'm at 31 by myself. Yeah. He said, no, we got an offer at $51.3 million.
Oh, wow.
Because there was synergies there, not only offensive synergies, but also defensive synergies. And they knew they could pay up because of what they could do with saving some of the overhead of again, not the people out in the field and all have all the customer relationships, but the CFO and some of those different things in the accounting. But more about it was that they had the growth. They had a way that they could help this company grow because the owners were they were doing it to a certain level, but it was really more of a lifestyle business, even though they were doing a great job. And they had this proactive money that they could bring. They could bring in more trucks. They could land more business. They could bid more aggressively because they didn't want to add more people and more trucks because they were kind of at the limit of, my client was kind of at the limit of what they wanted to do and how many people they wanted to manage. So the funny thing is that same buyer came to them 6 months earlier and said, hey, we want to buy your company before we were involved. And they said, we have a private equity firm that's backing us and we have a written mandate where we can't pay above a 5 multiple. We just, even if we wanted to, we can't, like it's in our contract with them, which would have been a $30 million deal. So what did the financial buyers want to pay? 25, 30, and 31. What did the synergistic buyer pay? $51.3 million. So that's the big difference, is that when they have to pay up, they can, because they know there's growth opportunities. They know there's cost savings. It's that 1 + 1 = 3 or 4, not just 2. That's the biggest difference. A financial buyer, 1 + 1 is going to equal 2. A synergistic buyer, 1 + 1 may equal 3 or 4, and they don't want to pay for that extra synergies, but if they have to, they can, if they really want the company. And that's what we've seen over the last 27 years, is the difference of those that can really pay up. They don't like to, but they will, because they know they need that asset. They need that company for what their growth plan is.
So if you really find someone that has a strategic value, not just the typical financial, you could get a significant bigger valuation in the process.
Yes. So again, most of these synergistic buyers are trying to act like financial buyers, going one-on-one with the buyer. And just to give you an idea, Daniel, I just spoke at a national event, and they asked me, I said, look at the last 3 deals that you guys have done where there was a true written unsolicited offer. And then you guys ended up going to market, and what did you get? What was the difference? The difference, I didn't know what the number was. We added up the last 3 just randomly. 73%
more
was the difference between the initial offers that they all got into what we were able to get in an unsolicited offer. In fact, the last one we just did was a smaller deal, but again, similar story, where they would deal with the buyer for a couple months, one-on-one, he was dragging it out. They were dragging out the buyers. It was a family office or private equity group. And they had come up from like 5 or 6 million up to 10 million, but it was all an earnout. And they said, look, $10 million, that is our final and best offer. If you don't want it, we're out. We're gone. Trying to scare them because, again, they were the only show in town, the only buyer at the table. And their financial advisor said, I just heard Scott Cornerstone speak. Why don't we bring them in at least for a phone call? So we did that discovery call. Then we did our RMA. And she's like, look, I said, we think the fair market value is around 10. In the last 5 years, on average, Cornerstone has been about 20% better than that because of the multiple offers and the pummel that we can create. I said, so market's around 10, but I said we can definitely get you more cash at close, because we're usually getting 80 to 90% cash at close, and they were at 50% or thereabout. So they signed up with us, and as they were doing that, they sent an email to that one buyer and said, hey, I really appreciate your offers and working with you over the last several months. I still want to work with you, but I only get one chance to do this. I want to make sure I do it right. I've hired a group, Cornerstone, to help us with this. Within 5 minutes of that email going out, a phone call came into the seller, and their first thing they said was, what's it going to take for you not to sign with Cornerstone? But they just said, I can't pay any more. That's the last, highest and best offer. We can't do any more. How much more money do you want for you not to have Cornerstone take you to market? Because they knew we were going to run a process and get multiple offers and values going up. So they stuck around their 10 million, and maybe they went up to 11, and we sold it for 14 with much more, almost all cash at close.
Wow. So
just in that one was a 40% spread, but really it was probably closer to 100% spread of what their actual value of the company was that they were valuing it, without the earnout. So that's the stuff that's going on out there, is that whether they're a financial buyer or even a strategic buyer is going to act like a financial buyer if there's only one, if they're the only party in town, because that's what they're hoping for, is that you have no clue and what the value is, which again, in our study, over 60% had no clue at all, had not got a value ever, let alone in the last year to really understand what the market is. And that's, I think, the one thing that a lot of business owners don't understand, is that you could be doing the same revenue today, same EBITDA today as you did last year, and your value could be up 10, 50% or down 10, 15%, and you did nothing different. It's, are there more or less uncertainties in the marketplace? Are buyers, are the banks lending, are the lenders lending more aggressively or not? What are the interest rates? Are interest rates going up or are they going down? Is there a war going on? Tariffs, COVID, all of these things going on change the value of a company up or down. And I've seen companies like through COVID, I saw companies that we sold for that got the COVID bump and we sold them for significantly more than they would have without COVID. And I see companies that went in the tank and some went bankrupt, during COVID because they just didn't have a sustainable business.
Right. Awesome. How can a CEO, an entrepreneur, someone that runs a business, start thinking about strategic buyers? What's like, is usually suppliers or vendors? Like, who's the typical, or how can you identify that Rembrandt in the attic that someone will value more?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. Obviously, it's really specific to that business, but I would say some of the things you could start looking at. The most common acquisition, the most common type of acquisition is what we call market share. They're picking up market share. So who in your industry is doing the same thing that you're doing, but they're not maybe in your backyard. They're the county, they're the country over. You're bushing up against each other, but you're not direct competitors. And it's like playing the game of Risk on the world. It's like, I want to conquer the whole continent, so which countries am I going to buy next, and everything else. So instead of people going to a new country or a new area and starting from scratch and hoping and praying that they can start something and find the right employees and get the right branding and everything else, they'll just buy that market share. So who would you be a good fit for? If you look and go, who's at least the same size of you, if not bigger? Most times you'd like to have someone about 3 times bigger. So if you're doing 30 million, what are the 90, 75 to $100 million companies are bigger out there that might be interested in looking at your company? Because if you're both the same size, even if they want to pay more, they might go, I just can't pay up because I can't risk my company that if it doesn't work out right, I'll take us both down. But if you're 100 million buying a $20 million company, it moves the needle enough. And if it was a hiccup, it's not going to, sink the mothership. So I would look at market share. So that was what we did in the story I told you about, the 51 million. They were right next to each other, but not really working in each other's backyard. So it was a perfect fit that it was just the adjacent market that they could move into and continue to build that out. So that would be number one. The number two would be who sells to your customer base, but a different product or service. So they could cross-sell, that's synergistic. So who's selling to your customer base that would love to have you, or if they had you, they could sell more of their product or service, whatever it might be. And where there's some synergies between those two. And that's, again, going back to the janitorial and window washing company. That was a perfect fit because one did outside window washing, one did inside janitorial companies. And now they all worked in office buildings in large buildings across the area. So they were talking to the same landlords, the same management companies that were managing these properties. And now they're offering two products versus the one. So you see a lot of that. I think that's the trend, is that more business owners would rather deal with one person or one company that offers multiple services than having, multiple companies that they have to deal with, kind of that one throat to choke type of mentality that, okay, if it goes wrong, I got to make one phone call versus I've got to call 4 or 5 different groups for every little thing. And then if you're a cyclical business, let's just say you're something where you're really strong in the first quarter, first and second quarter. Well, who would be, a company that's really strong in the third and fourth quarter, but, but light in the first and second quarter, so there's some seasonality or cyclicality to your business. You could say, okay, who are, so up in Wisconsin, up in the Midwest in the United States, we have all 4 seasons. So we might have a landscape company that, they're busy, spring, all summer and early fall, but then all their people and all their trucks and everything sits vacant. Well, now they buy a snow plowing company and a salting company. Now those employees have jobs and they use the same trucks and put a plow on the front versus hauling dirt in the back, and they're busy all year long. So those assets get more utilized and they don't have to try to find new employees every year because they might go away and go get a more of a full-time job. So I would look at, that of where does 1 + 1 = 3? What types of companies would be the synergies, or what could you do? Could you help a company that if once they buy my product, they're either could buy one of these 4 products or services. And now if they buy your product, you could recommend their product or, whatever it might be. But that's where I would start. And that's where we'd love to sit down and have more of a one-on-one talk with, brainstorm with our clients, even just up front, just even if they just want to discuss it, because it's so intimate. Each company is so different, and different sellers want different things. So it depends on what does a good deal look like? Because if it's all about the money, well, then it might be, let's find the most synergistic buyer. They'll pay the most money. And if my employees get fired, if they move it to a different country, so be it. I got the most money. Yep. Or there's other people that go, I don't want to leave money on the table, but I also want to protect my employees. I want to protect the culture that I built here. I want to make sure that we give back to our community, and I want to make sure they give back to the community as well, and do the things that have built our reputation over the years. I would say that many times our sellers, at the end of the day, when they have those 5 or 10 offers, they'll take the second, sometimes even the third highest offer, because there's a better cultural fit, or it's something that also. So we have a exercise we have our potential clients take it's just a 1 through 10 exercise. And I think the Scaling Up coaches actually have access to this, is that it's what's important to me. And when they're not under duress, when they're not, in the heart of the deal, they can sit back and really reflect, like, what do I want out of this deal? What makes sense? What makes sense to me? And it just really helps them think that. So once you understand what's important to you, that also helps you even bifurcate even more about who are the right buyers and what should you be looking for and how should you creating those things. So that's where we love to sit down one-on-one with business owners and really help talk through that, because it is an important piece. When you look at why so many sellers don't sell, and then the ones that do, it's often said that 70-75% of them have seller regret or remorse. What are the top 3 reasons? Number 1 is they sold to an unsolicited offer and left a ton of money on the table, and they're upset after they find out that. Number 2 is they sold and they have no idea what they're going to do next. They were running away from, I'm burnt out, I'm tired, I don't want to do this anymore, but they have no idea where they're going. So we talk about what's on your bucket list, what do you want to be remembered for, where are your passions? And then the third is that everybody talks about the cash, right? That's, how much money, what kind of multiple? That's what they talk about in a deal. They don't think about all the other things. So they take the highest offer, and then 6 months, a year later, hear about how horrible the culture is, hear about their best employees got fired, or they quit because they couldn't stand it anymore. And they go, oh my gosh, I took an extra 8% more, and now I'm afraid to go out in town because my 100 employees hate me for taking, the highest offer. And I just got caught up in the moment. It doesn't make them bad people. It's just they get caught up in the moment. Yep. So those are the 3 things: is what do I want out of a deal? What am I going to do next? And then making sure they get to choose who is that successor, the multiple offers, no asking price. So they get to choose who who they want to sell to, so they don't leave any money on the table.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Now let's, to close the last 5 or so minutes, let's talk a little bit about Latin America.
Sure.
Or international companies. What competitive advantage companies in Latin America could use to their advantage to be able to sell higher or be able to attract an international buyer?
Yeah. I mean, being just proximity, there's distribution companies, there's light manufacturing companies, with lower, employee, rates and things like that, or there's not many companies that don't fit from a synergistic standpoint. I mean, you have cheaper labor that's in, just looking at the United States, cheaper labor in the United States, good quality workforce. So you can get quality work done at a lesser cost to do it in the States. It's same time zones. It's easier, distribution wise, getting the product up into the States is a heck of a lot easier than flying it over from China or Taiwan or putting on a boat or anything along that line. So it really seems that if someone's looking to still offshore, Latin America is a much more likely of an opportunity now, and more favorable opportunity than it was maybe 5 or 10 years ago, whenever he was going, out east to China and Asia and things along the line. So I think people are trying to find that balance between, getting some cost synergies and cost savings, but also good quality product and done on time and everything else. And I think that's where Latin America brings that right mix of quality and cost efficiencies to the marketplace. So I'd say, yeah, manufacturing, value add distribution. If people are looking to get down, in many United States companies are looking to expand into Latin America. And who are the well-run companies there that have teams that can come down, and we know it's not just tied to one person. And in looking at those things as well, I think is important.
Okay. And for companies in Latin America that want to buy a company in the US to have a strategic company there, what's the process? What they should do? How can you find the right companies to acquire?
Yeah. So what we can do is we sit down with them, understand what their role is. What are they looking for? Because growth for the sake of growth is usually not that, doesn't usually work out very well. So what are they trying to accomplish? And then we'll sit down with them, understand their strategy, vet out their strategy for growth. Then we'll put together, our team will put together a whole list of different sellers or companies that we think would make sense and hit that target. Because that's the difference too, is that if people are just looking to see what's on the marketplace, it's like, well, here's the target. There's nothing here, but there's one over here. That's the best one we've seen so far. Let's try that. And now we're competing against 5 or 10 or 15 other buyers to try to get this thing that's not quite a good fit for us. So what is the target? What size? What geographic location? What industry? We do all the research. And then what we'll do is after the buyer would sign off on that list, CEO would sign off on that list, like, yep, the strategies works. These are the right types of companies we'd love to own. Then we actually put together a program where we're actually reaching out to them proactively, calling them, emailing them, mailing them. We have a whole process of how we touch them 7, 8, 9 times. And then if they raise their hand going, yeah, I'd be interested in selling, we'll take the initial call, put together a 1-page executive summary of whatever information we can get from them. Some give us very little because of confidentiality reasons. Others just dump as much as we want to get on them. We'll put that together, send that over to the CEO, to our client, and say, hey, here's this opportunity. Here's their website. Here's what we were able to get from them. Do you like this or don't like this? No, we don't like it. Okay, great. Next. No, yeah, we actually do like this. Then we would set up a call with our client, the buyer, and the seller, learn a little bit more, and then we dive deeper into diligence. And then we're doing helping with valuation and negotiation, and we could also help them build their team of tax people and M&A attorney, in the States here that they could use, or if they want to use their one back home, obviously that's fine as well. But basically, we help them build out their team. We're creating the list. We're going out, running the campaigns. We're getting people to raise their hand, and then we're negotiating on their behalf. So what our goal is, just like we talked about, we want to get into that one-on-one negotiations where the seller isn't in market. They're not talking to 5 or 10 other buyers. It's just us and them. And if they we want them to get to like us, and then we get to the closing table. So yeah, that process, our typical thing that we run is like a 4 to 6 month process. Yeah, we creating the strategy, putting together the materials, running the list, running through the list. Could be 15 names, it could be 200 names. It just depends on how big they want to get, or how big the opportunity is that they want to go after. And then we get some where we get one to close, and it's exciting. And there are times we don't find one right now, but now they've got a list of 5 or 7 targets that have raised their hand and go, yeah, Daniel, I'm interested. I like you guys, but I'm 1 or 2 years away. And now you're building this pipeline of other companies that you can acquire 1, 2, 3, 5 years down the road. So you run the process once, and then it goes from there. And it has legs that it continues. We just had a client that called me and said, a process we ran 7 years ago. A guy was finally ready to retire. He pulled out his drawer because we put together some really unique materials that we send out on behalf of the company. Yeah. And he pulled out, he goes, told his attorney, call these guys. I want to sell to them. 7 years later. Like, wow. And so you never know, how long those legs are that on that campaign. But that's the process. And then obviously if we find a buyer that's interested, or a seller that's interested, well, then we just go month to month on our contract until we get the deal done. And then, if they want to keep going, we keep going, or we hit the pause button or end the agreement at that time. And so we're basically like their corporate development team. We can come in and out on a fractional basis, or, as much or little as they need us. So that way they're not hiring someone full-time, at a big wage to do this. They're just bringing a team in when they need us, and then they kick us out when they just want to focus on growing their business organically.
So What's the one piece of advice that you could give a CEO that wants to build a very valuable company?
Find a way to replace yourself in the company as soon as possible.
Okay, what do they have to stop doing in their company to raise valuation?
Making all the decisions. They have to let go. They have to find people that can help them, that are smarter than them in that particular thing or better than them, and be redundant. I would say stop making all the decisions.
Okay. After a successful exit, how do you define success for the CEO or the seller?
That is a very personal question. And what we would say is, before you sell, that's why we have exercises that we give our clients of what do they want to do next. Truly think about this. If you think you're going to just turn off the energy, turn off the volume per se, and sit on the rocking chair sipping lemonade the rest of your life and relax, you are sorely wrong. As an entrepreneur, you are wired a certain way and you can't just turn it off. So you need to take some time, relax, take some time. We always say, like, take a year, go work your bucket list, go travel, go do all the things you've always wanted to do. But then after a year, really think about what brings you value. Is it starting another company for yourself with your kids? Is it mentoring? Is it coaching? Is it tutoring? Can be anything. The thing is, you just have to have a thing. What's that one thing that gets you out of bed in the morning? And if you don't, that's where people get really sick. They get depressed and bad things happen. But know about it. Get an idea of what you think it's going to be before you're going into it. Because otherwise, what I've seen is people have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we go through this whole process, and they get to the closing table. We get them more than they ever thought they were going to get. And they go, I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I just can't do it. And they've just, they tainted the marketplace because now that's all, that guy's never going to sell. They've just burned through a couple $100,000 that they didn't have to spend, a huge distraction for their team, only to say, nope, I know I don't want to be here, but it's better than what I don't know is out there in that black hole that it's called the future. So I'm going to stay here. And even though I don't like it, at least it's my routine. If I've been my routine for 30 years, it's going to be my routine, I guess, till I die. And that's just a sad place to see people be.
What destroys a company value faster, ego or lack of systems?
Oh, that's a great question. Oh, depends how bad the ego is, but I would say systems. If you don't have systems, if you don't have the right systems in place, it's going to fall apart at some point because, again, going back to probably the owners, the whole business, and it's not saleable to begin with anyway. So you're just going to make a bunch of money and then shut it down if you don't put systems in place.
All right. If someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way for reaching out?
Yeah, you can give me a call at the corporate office here, which is 920-436-9890 here in the States. And my assistant is Megan, and she can help coordinate something. Or you can look at our website, which is www.cornerstone, and then a hyphen or dash business.com. So cornerstone-business.com. And would love to help. Anyway, we are here as a resource. We're a big part of the strategic scaling up coach and what you guys are doing. We think that the coaching teams are so good, and that when you talk about 1 + 1 = 3, when the coaches can help them really get the companies ready, we can help understand value, and they really prepare. It's amazing what we see with these clients when they're fully prepared and they're ready to go to market. They're getting even more offers than what our normal clients are getting because the companies are just better positioned and they're more exciting. And the more excitement we create, typically the higher the value, the better structure that we can get.
That's awesome. Scott, thank you very much. Really appreciate the conversation. As you know, as you said at the beginning, there's a lot of business owners wanting to sell. There's a great alliance, Latin America and the US.
Absolutely.
So there should be a lot of opportunities cross-border within the countries.
I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of cross-border deals getting done next year between Latin America and North America.
All right, Scott, thank you very much. Great pleasure.
All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye.